Good afternoon, everybody. We are very excited to be joined here today with Dr. Amy Lam. Dr. Lam, before we get started, do you mind just doing a quick introduction of yourself and your background for our audience?
Okay, so my name is Dr. Amy Lam. I am a 2015 proud graduate of SUNY Optometry. I also completed my residency through a SUNY affiliated residency program at the VA Northport. And the residency specialty was low vision, rehabilitative care, and primary care optometry. Since my completion of my residency, I have brought low vision into every practice modality that I have tried to enter. So I was bouncing around different private practices and I set up low vision at those practices in concurrent to doing primary care optometry. And eventually I built a sort of entrepreneurial business in New York City. So for people who were around 2018 to 2019 timeframe, I was actively building a low vision practice in New York City. However, due to the pandemic, that destroyed a lot of my network connections for New York and also in New Jersey. So I had to kind of rethink and pivot how I wanted to still do low vision and practice optometry at the level that I would want to do. This opportunity where I am currently. So I should have started with what I do currently. I'm the director of the Low Vision Clinic here at University Hospital, which is the teaching hospital of Rutgers Medical School in Newark, New Jersey. So my time here is split between low vision care, direct low vision care. I also mentor ophthalmology residents and expose them to low vision care and just how to work with optometry cohesively. And then the other half of my time is spent doing comprehensive general ophthalmology non-surgical care. So I think in optometry terms, we would call this advanced ocular disease. On the ophthalmology side, they refer to it as general non-surgical ophthalmology care. So anyways, going back to my story, I was looking for something a little bit more stable after the pandemic, after a lot of things were disrupted. I don't think I'm the only person who faced a severe disruption during COVID. So I was looking to apply for an institutional position, and this job opened up. And I think in previous interviews, I talked about this job opening up in 2018, but at the time, I didn't feel that I was quite ready to lead a department in this way. But by the time I applied in 2021, different experience, definitely more experience. And when I got here, there was a little bit of an adjustment period, but now I'm thriving and I'm happy to share my story on how I went from, a graduate, not sure how I wanted to implement a specialty practice to now being the director of a premier low vision clinic in New Jersey and also being very active in New Jersey State optometry.
That's fascinating. And tell us a little bit more about your entrepreneurial fight. I believe that entrepreneurship is almost like a fire within us, right? And you
Yes.
had that fire and you
Yes.
started something. But now you are in a more stable, secure job, which sounds absolutely great. Do you still have the fire in you? And what are the projects that you may be working on based on
Yeah, I
that
still
impulse?
have that fire. I have a big passion for low vision exposure. So I actually am the faculty mentor of a medical student club to expose medical students to the clinical side of ophthalmology care. So just so we understand, medical students don't get much exposure to ophthalmology until they enter their rotations in third or fourth year, and they get maybe 2, 3 days of eye anatomy in their entire medical school careers. So I have a partnership with a local nonprofit here in New Jersey that focuses on helping people who are visually impaired. And my work with them led to the development of this program for the medical students to do community service and volunteer there. So that is one of many side projects that I have
Mm.
going. I have found in optometry, most of the very successful optometrists never just wear one hat. They wear many hats and they have a lot of things to keep themselves busy. So that is one project that has taken up a lot of mentorship time. A second project I've been working on is developing a leadership institute through the New Jersey State Optometric, or I'm sorry, New Jersey Society of Optometric Physicians. I'm going to reference that as NJSOP going forward. NJSOP thought of a leadership institute program to help develop leadership roles within organized optometry in New Jersey. So myself and 3 other board members, one of them who's also a SUNY alum, we developed this program and piloted this last year. And we are currently designing our second inaugural class to train young optometrists to get familiar with the state legislative, or just not just legislative, but just state organized optometry, to reinforce the importance of being active in your optometric societies. So, I mean, I have more projects. I don't want to go on, but
we love projects, and we love side projects.
So many projects. Like, I have ways to channel this passion, because as you mentioned, as an entrepreneur, it takes a certain type of fire and dedication. And one of the things that I find very lovely about being in an institutional role is that I have access to a lot of things I would say a private practice optometrist may not have access to. So being embedded within the greater medical system, there is a lot of opportunities to provide other sorts of, not maybe optometric direct care, but just to be on a public health side. So I actually was a participant in one of the grand rounds. It was an health equity grand round offered by my hospital. So I was a co-presenter for one of those sessions. And right now I'm talking with upper hospital administration to try to develop a program to educate people about the importance of eye health and to tie in other specialties of medicine. But I obviously want to put optometry in the forefront of that. So that is in the works currently. So that's another small side project. And another project I'm doing, or that's actually accomplished, is being the director of the low vision clinic. We worked with a lot of people with visual impairment, but one of the things I found challenging was when you check in for an office visit, there's no indication on the medical record indicating this person's visual impairment. So a lot of things were done in an insensitive way, such as a front desk staff potentially handing over a clipboard telling someone who is visually impaired to sign off on paperwork they can't read. So, and that's just one of many examples. This could also mean like pointing and gesturing to a location, telling someone to sit down. But if they can't see where you're gesturing, that kind of gives an unpleasant experience for the patient. So one of the things I worked on, again with upper hospital administration, was developing a way in the medical record to tag patients as visually impaired so that they could get a better patient experience. So as I mentioned, some of these experiences span beyond just optometry itself, but I think optometry has such a big role in the healthcare system and in the public health system.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It's great. So we definitely have a lot to talk about just from
Yes.
the projects themselves. But I do want to jump to the very beginning where we had discussed not just your connection with the nonprofit for the medical students, but also even coming out of school, just finding practices to work with in your business. How did you develop that network, those connections from the very beginning, just coming out of school?
So just coming out of school, I knew I wanted to do low vision. So that was a non-negotiable for every job interview or job office that I would meet with. I would tell them one of my non-negotiables is I'm bringing low vision into your practice. And once you do that a few times, the script becomes very easy to say because you know, in the beginning, it was very difficult. I wasn't sure how much equipment I would need or if they would be willing to fund the equipment because low vision practice generally requires additional equipment. Thankfully, at the time, my residency director, the late Dr. Michael Fisher, who's also a SUNY alum, He helped guide me with the vendors and who to reach out to. And he helped form the base of, I guess, my low vision practice. Like, what is the starter kit for low vision? And over time, I drafted documents and I reached out to these vendors myself. I got to know the vendors, and I was able to show a very distinct budget sheet of how much it would cost to kickstart a low vision practice. And I would present this. I would say, this is how much it would cost to obtain low vision equipment. And obviously, there's negotiation there. It's not everyone's going to say yes immediately. But again, you find a common ground. And most every private practice I went to approach to say, I would like to do low vision, and this is my plan for execution, it was welcomed and not really turned down. So the challenging part was the fiscal part of how to get paid for a low vision exam. And that did cause some friction with certain practices. And that was a point for me to potentially exit said practice, because again, my motivation has been to do low vision as a primary thing, and then general optometry or primary care optometry as secondary. And I made that very clear when I was interviewing for practices. So I think knowing what you want to do, being specific about what you want to do, is really, really important.
That's great. And my question now has to do with the kind of the purpose of this conversation, which is building career capital.
Yes.
And we believe that, part of overall happiness in life has a lot to do with how we build ourselves, and our careers definitely speak a lot to our happiness. And career capital is our ability to develop skills and connections and capitalize on some of the gifts that we may have to gain what we call career affluence. It's our ability to walk around the world of the business world and just have all these opportunities available to us. And it seems that you have accomplished that very beautifully. How did you, throughout the years, build your career capital? Did you have a plan, or what do you think are the main pillars of your career capital that gives you so much latitude in the professional world now?
I think it's really important to follow up with people. I think that's 90% of life is showing up or just being friendly. So I did move a lot of practices early in my career, but the reps and the people and the context, they don't change. I mean, sometimes they do change with unexpected things, but generally reps in a company or key contact people within a state agency or key contact people within a nonprofit, those names generally don't change very much, even if you're the one moving around in the state. And I think maintaining those relationships is really important, and being proactive, because, if I'm the one moving or taking on a new position, but I still want to maintain a relationship with a vendor or a relationship with the person within an organization, the onus is on me to tell them, hey, by the way, I really enjoyed working with you, but I'm letting you know I no longer work at this place. I'm working at another place. So a lot of it is being proactive and being responsive. When people reach out to you and ask you something, I'm not condoning throwing everything that you're working on to try to help this person, but if it's within your ability to help, and if it's not within your ability to redirect. But that's the goodwill of maintaining good business capital amongst, like, good business relationships, is having a good rapport with the people you work with. And again, it's not necessarily just patients. These are people who can help your patients or can help you career-wise. I think even in terms of my early days as an optometrist, some more seasoned NJSOP optometrists had reached out to me. And I still remember the first person who reached out to me. He gave me his cell phone number and he was like, anything you need me to consult with you, you can text me. And that relationship has blossomed over the years from being a mentorship relationship to now we are co-board of directors for NJSOP, and we're actually co-lecturing at Optometry's meeting this coming year in Phoenix. So it's important to maintain good connections, and the professionalism, I think, carries you a long way. So again, when people either reach out to you, be sure to respond and reply, and then, keep a good relationship, because you never know who might be able to give you insight or might be a good collaborator in the future.
In InSIGHTS Career Capital, in our book, we talk about the fact that every optometry student is going to graduate with an optometry degree.
Correct.
And we will have to have passed the boards, which is everyone is leaving with definitely the same amount of knowledge that is required in order to become a good practitioner. But then there are also those who develop skills and knowledge beyond the minimum requirement. Right. What do you think were the skills and knowledge and experiences beyond what every student in every optometry school gets, that brought you to where you are today?
That's a great question. This is something I actually talk to my residents about a lot, because the clinical-based knowledge is expected when you leave school. And I remember when I was a student, certain preceptors would tell me clinical care is going to become the easiest part of your day. And I did not believe them. I was like, no, clinical care is difficult, because you have to diagnose, you have to make sure you don't make an error. There are a lot of things involved in actually being the doctor and seeing the patient. But now that I'm at the stage of my career I am now, I do realize clinical care is probably the most easy part of my career, or of my day-to-day, because that part, you've studied, you've learned, you know how to treat something, you know how to prescribe something, but that is not the foundation of medical care or eye care. What is really, really critical is the communication skills with the patient. And that is something that is very difficult to develop well immediately out of optometry school, because as a medical professional, sometimes there is conflict in the exam room, right? And how you navigate that conflict will determine whether or not you are a good provider or a great provider, or you're a provider that someone goes, I'm not going back to that person because of whatever resolved in the exam or whatever happened in the exam room. I think one of the biggest areas of growth for me since optometry school was developing good communication skills and being open to feedback, because I think in optometry school, we're very focused on, did we get the prescription right? Did we diagnose this correctly? Did we read this image correctly? And that can be a lot of pressure for a young graduate, because your experience is limited, and maybe you're not sure how to handle a clinical situation, and that's concerning. And I can sympathize with that being at that point in my career. However, once you get beyond the clinical fear of, I see something, I'm not sure how to handle it, I call it the second part of doctoring, is learning how to convey that information to your patient in a way that they understand, which can be very different depending on the population you're working with, and making sure that they are involved in their patient care. And that is a communicative skill, and that is a personal relationship skill that I think has carried over in terms of me being able to maintain relationships with contacts in nonprofits, in various vendors. That ability to maintain a relationship translates to the exam room, but furthermore, just the ability to convey information in a non-judgmental, unbiased way. That is a skill that can definitely be worked on. And I can talk more about how to develop that, but I'm not sure if I'm going off of topic with what you were asking.
No, that's great. If you could give us a couple of pointers for our listeners, that would be great.
Sure. So for communication, there's multiple parts of communication. I recently did a talk at SUNY at the request of Dr. Wang called Delivering Bad News. And
you see, Dr. Wang, she brings only the best to speak to our students. So.
She keeps asking me and roping me into other projects, but it's okay. I don't mind. I think that this is great. And I think a lot of students end up appreciating what I call the non-optometry side of optometry, because I think in school, or at least in my schooling, there was a lot of focus on being clinically accurate, being clinically correct. But once you leave the wings of your preceptor, no longer is it just the clinical accuracy that's important. It's how you present yourself, not just to your patients, but as to other providers, to other people you may be working with. So I know a lot of optometrists collaborate with other specialists too, whether it's our medical colleagues or people in occupational therapy or school specific collaborations. But how we communicate as professionals, it's also representing optometry in a way that's positive in the professional light. So in terms of communication, there was that delivering bad news lecture that I did about a month ago, and it talked about how to react when you're giving bad news, how a patient would react. And that is not something that I think was not something that I learned in optometry school. It was something that I had to learn through a little bit of trial and error. The nature of the work that I do, I think I deliver bad news on a daily basis. And I would admit in the beginning, it might be a little bit more challenging because some patients react poorly, but learning to depersonalize certain interactions, not in the sense that you're depersonalizing the human, but a lot of patients will have reactions to what you say, right? And those reactions don't necessarily stem from you as a provider, but they stem from whatever stressors are going on into their lives. And that is really, really key in terms of being a balanced provider, because people will be upset over a number of things. You know, you could be the best doctor in the world, and somehow someone will still have something negative to say about you or about the care that you provided. And being able to stay confident and say, hey, no, I think I did the best I can for you. This is what I can do for you, and not letting their frustration and anger rile that up in yourself. That's really, really key component of being a good and balanced doctor. And that is something that can be trained. That is something that I have been through a lot of training through my hospital, fortunately. There's this great course called Search Inside Yourself. This is an empathy building class. This is a communication class. And the techniques there, they seem simple, but they're actually quite profound, because I don't think that there's any optometrist who means poorly when speaking to their patients. I would like to believe that everyone who goes to optometry school, they want what's best for the patient. I would like to believe that. Sometimes, though, when we are stressed with our days, whether it's we're running behind, or there's some kind of managerial conflict, or you're just not happy in your workplace in that moment, that can bleed into patient care. And to be able to mentally be present with all of your patients, irregardless of what's going on with you, and also being able to accept that your patients might also be coming into your exam room with all sorts of unknown baggage, and learning how to depersonalize that, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're here to give care to the patient. And, you know, I've also learned over the years, patients will do what patients want to do. As healthcare providers, our jobs are to guide patients to the best possible outcomes. I think earlier in my career, it was easy to feel bad or feel like I did not do good enough if a patient didn't follow through on a recommendation. And I think that's very common when you first graduate. It is very much, oh no, the patient didn't follow up for a retinal tear. Did I do something wrong? I think that's very common in an early stage. But at a certain point, you learn, I've done my part, I've documented, and that's the best that I can do. And I think in one of my talks, actually the talk that I did recently, my last slide was, the only thing I can do is say I did my best, and I'll leave the rest to, whatever. I don't remember the exact phrase, but I'll have to look back. But it was a really cute rhyming phrase that's I did my best, leave the else to rest, or something to that extent. And I think that takes a certain amount of confidence in yourself, a certain amount of recognizing, I did the best I can. And obviously documenting is very important. But it's just coming from that more mature approach has really changed how I practice as a doctor, and has also changed how I view my patients. Because a lot of times, especially working in an area where the access to healthcare, not just access to healthcare, but there are many social determinants of health that hinder a patient from being able to come to their visits, right? And from the outside, I'm thinking of the non-compliant glaucoma patient who isn't taking their eye drops or has missed follow-ups for 2-3 years, and they come back and they are not in a good shape. And you are wondering what happened, right? And I think as a new grad, it's easy to jump to the conclusion, whether it's, oh, this patient is non-compliant, or I'm not delivering my news correct, or I'm not delivering information correctly. Why aren't they doing what I'm asking? But I think at this point of my career, I no longer question my own clinical judgment, or I just trust that I did the best I could. And then I always ask my patient what happened, right? Because you never know. You never know what people are going through. And I think this also ties back to relationship building, right? Because to build a relationship with a patient, they're not just coming to you for your clinical expertise. I mean, we could go on a separate tangent. Patients can Google stuff on, especially with AI. They can come in with their own diagnosis. They can think this is what I need, or this is what I want. There is a treasure trove of information out there in the world. What they're coming for you as a provider is to build that connection, to build that trust. And if we come from a non-judgmental approach to patient care, meaning instead of shaming the patient who didn't come in or didn't take their eye drops, being curious, curiosity is foundational in being a good doctor. It's asking the questions, and not just the questions of, you didn't take your drops. Okay, period. Why didn't you take your drops? Tell me what happened, right? And it gives them a chance to be a participant in their healthcare too. Because I think medicine has moved very much away from like a this is what you do sort of medicine to, okay, these are the options. What do you think is acceptable? And patients who feel engaged in their care, they are more likely to come back and follow up. And that is my experience in working in the area that I work currently.
Thank you. That's great. Dr. Wang.
Yeah, so I have one more question just on this topic before we move on to our next section. But I do think the discussion of the importance of soft skills, as we call them, is so important, especially to garner a strong clinician. But I think it's important to look at, you were talking about how this was a skill you had grown, especially within the hospital setting, how they did have classes. How do you think optometry schools can support their students in this growth since their very beginning of becoming a clinician?
I think communication modules are really, really important. So one of the things, I'm actually very fortunate in the opportunities that have been provided to me. So first things first, I also did the AOA Leadership Institute, which is a great program as an early graduate of optometry school. The AOA Leadership Program is a leadership development program that is free to any young AOA member, and it requires an application. But through the filtering of the application and being accepted, you end up going through this leadership growth class over the course of a year. And I think one of the most powerful modules that I did was a public speaking workshop. And I think this is something that can be implemented in optometry school. You shouldn't have to wait until you're 3 to 5 years out of school to be given a public speaking class to help improve communication. Those things can start very early. And it's surprising because public speaking is such an important part of our profession. Every patient interaction is a mini public speaking session. I think this should really be introduced first year, because before you go to clinic, it's better to have these kinds of communication skills. I found that it was very valuable to have been recorded public speaking to avoid the errors of public speaking, but also to allow for critique of each other's performances, because that allows you to refine where you are. So I think some sort of public speaking module, not just a lecture two kind of thing, but an interactive group-based setting where there's live feedback is really, really important. I think also with regards to my hospital having classes to help develop it, a lot of the skills were modeled through in-person activity-based live feedback events. And I think that's really critical. You can read about communication all you want in a book, but it's the actual act of communicating that and the practice of it that is really going to help improve those skills.
I have a question about your why. Part of our model, we talk about in building career capital, we talk about the why, the how, and the who. You talked a little bit about who and the importance of working within your network and being responsive, connecting with individuals as much as possible. And let's talk a little bit about the why. What is your why? What is it that gets Dr. Lam going? And how do you said it very beautifully. You channel your passion through many different side projects. What is that why, and how do you channel it into so many different projects? And later on, we're going to ask, how do you do all that, being the busy person that you do? But let's start with the bigger picture.
Okay, so the why, it took me a while to get to my why, because as I mentioned, I had taken on many roles prior to this role, but now being at this role for about 5 years now, I've really been able to craft my why in a way that resonates with me. One of the things about low vision care is that it is an underrepresented specialty. And unfortunately, in the inner urban area I work at, there's not many people who have good access to low vision care. And this is through years of listening to experiences, thousands of low vision patients that come by. And I'm usually the first provider that gets them connected with the state for services, or gives them a magnifier or tool to get them reading again, or potentially get them back to the workplace. And when you know you're making this kind of an impact, these are large impacts on people's lives. It's really hard to walk away from that and say, oh yeah, no, I don't want to do this. It's very touching. Every day I have a patient say, oh, I'm so glad that we found you. I'm so glad that you were able to help me in such a way. And I feel very privileged to be in a position where I have these connections, and these connections didn't come overnight. They were built over a career of doing these things, but the connections and the ability to connect people and work with people, I think that's the beauty of like what I've been building up to this point and where I am currently. So I really do feel that the role I am is perfect for everything I've worked up to. I wanted to talk about my secondary role here. So I think there's been a lot of focus on low vision, which is understandable. But my second component is I do a lot of advanced ocular disease care at the hospital. And this was actually something that I had to negotiate for. I know this was a question on the sheet. So when I initially applied for this position, it was listed as a low vision only position. And that is something I personally did not want to do, because low vision, it's a very rewarding specialty, but it's also a very, very emotionally taxing specialty at times. So when I sat down and interviewed with my chief, I told him specifically I did not want to do full-time low vision care. And I negotiated the ocular disease component into my I guess my offer letter. And that has been my saving grace, is being able to leverage not just a passion of mine, but also a secondary passion. And one of the things that has kept me going on the other side is this innate desire to learn more. So being in a tertiary quaternary eye clinic, the pathology that comes through is always, it's very diverse. You never know how the day is going to go. And that keeps it exciting for me as someone who has been committed to learning more, to understanding more. This is a great environment for me to thrive. So I get both balance of like my personal passion of low vision and being able to be someone in the community that patients can count on. And then secondarily, my intellectual drive to learn more, to become a better doctor. I have both experiences fulfilled here, and that has really kept me kind of where I'm at and has continued to keep me where I'm at.
I like how you mentioned how your why kind of evolved and you went through a whole process to find it, and you have not one why, but a larger why and a smaller why. Because I think that oftentimes people think that they have to figure out what their why is right from the beginning, right in optometry school. And they, as soon as they settle on it, that's it. It becomes set on stone. And what you're saying is that, I mean, look
Now,
at your case. It evolved and it's something that you worked on, you built it, right? Which I think it's
right.
very
And
much.
sometimes you're not even aware of the impact of your work. Like when I first joined this institution, I wasn't aware of the deficit in low vision care in this
Mm,
area, and I wasn't even aware of how severe some of the pathology is because again, we're tertiary quaternary facilities. So we do see very extreme pathology. And then the more stories I heard, the more lives that I heard completely ruined by vision loss with no outlet. I mean, that's very compelling for you to be like, well, I'm the person who can help. I'm glad I can fill this role and I have the ability to fill this role. But that why didn't come until after being here for at least a year or two and really understanding my population that I work with.
Fascinating. And another thing that I think that I'm getting out of this conversation, and this is a theme that we're seeing throughout the conversation we have been having, is the fact that, and I've always been a big believer in this, is that a lot of students and prospective students as well, current students, when they're thinking about what a degree can offer you, they may sometimes think in a very limited way. And they think that, okay, I'm going to get this degree and I'm going to work with patients in a certain setting. And what I've been seeing here from everything that you are sharing with us is that there are just so many opportunities out there and so much room for you to even create new opportunities. And you seem to be an opportunity creator, which is also part of career capital, right? And you sit in a job and you say, well, this is what this job is all about. But what if, or what about doing this extra step, etc.? So to me, it's more of a comment than a question. It's just very fascinating to see the amazing things that you can do with this degree.
Right. It's not confined to just patient care. I think like you can be very impactful with the things that especially from a public health perspective. A lot of patients, especially the patients I work with, sometimes optometry or ophthalmology is their first portal into the bigger healthcare system. And that itself can drive someone to be like, oh, I can do more because yes, your role is to examine patients, but you can also expand on that. Oh, I see a lot of patients with diabetes. Maybe I can create a diabetic education course, right? So it's like it's knowledge that but it's how you work with that knowledge. Because as you said,
Mhm.
everyone has the same degree. My knowledge of diabetic retinopathy is the same as someone who studied for boards, pass their boards. It's the same knowledge. It's just what you choose to do with that. And sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes you have to think a little bit outside of the box. And this is where the career capital in building relationships with different people helps. So the reason why I've been able to expand out of my role in ophthalmology is making connections with people at my hospital who are not part of my department. So this is making connections with upper administration, with different departments, looking for areas to cross collaborate on and to find common ground. I think that's very, very critical if you want to become an opportunity creator, is looking for common ground with people.
That's wonderful. So I think that moves into our next session of how do you do this? We've talked a lot about the different facets of your life, all the
Yes.
hats you're wearing, the opportunities you're creating, but how do you create that, or what kind of daily routine do you have to ensure that you're productive and not just like maybe just doing busy work?
Yeah, so I am a stickler for having a clean inbox. I hate when I open my email and there's like 10,000 messages. Some of my coworkers are like this. I look at their emails and I get like a mild anxiety attack because for me, clearing tasks and keeping the inbox empty is my equivalent of keeping a clear desk, right? A clean and empty inbox means that I've addressed the things that need to be addressed. I followed up on the things that need to be followed up on. As I mentioned, following up is a very big and useful skill, not just as a personal networker, but just professionally. It's important to close the loop on things and to follow up and to get clarification. So one of the things I do every morning, I check my email, I delete all the things that are not relevant, and then based on the emails that I see, highest priority gets addressed first. And then I try to make sure my inbox is clear by the end of the day. That's my way of organizing like my digital workspace. I also try to sign my charts at the end of the day because any chart that is not signed by the end of the day is something that you're carrying over to the next day. Granted, there are certain days I am very busy, and I don't get to it. But again, having clear thing, no notifications is kind of the way I function to keep everything organized from day to day. But I think what's really, really important is maintaining a work life balance. This is so important because if you bring all your work home with you, you are creating this environment where you never get to fully recharge. I'm very much, if I'm at work, I'm here 100%. I am present. If my staff needs me or they need me to take a phone call or they need me to do something, I'm here for them. But the minute I'm out the door, I put a pretty firm boundary of once I'm not physically in my workspace, I will not engage in that sort of conversation just because if I let my work bleed into my personal life, there's no room to create that space. And that can be very difficult, right? Because then you're in work mode all day, all the time. And I know that not everyone has a position where there's a physical boundary of I am no longer in my workspace. Therefore, I do not want to think or deal with work at this time. But I think being intentional with your time and structuring it in such a way that this is dedicated, not work time. And I think that's how you maintain some semblance of balance.
How do you break down your day? Are you kind of someone who likes to start your work very, very early when there are no distractions? How do you manage kind of the cadence of your work and energy throughout the day?
So I do not wake up as early as I should. I know a lot of people say wake up early, you'll have the time to yourself. I wake up at a normal time. I just wanted to make it clear you don't have to commit to some crazy crazy
Wake up at
programming.
4 in the morning and everything is going
Yeah,
to
and
happen
have
to
3 hours to do
you.
everything by yourself. You don't need
Yeah.
to do that. I think a lot of it is just personal discipline and understanding. Like if you make a promise to yourself, and this is something that's not just an optometry lesson, this is something that I've learned over the years. Your trust in yourself starts with the promises you make to yourself. So how many of us have been like, oh, I'm going to work out today. And then like, 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock comes around and you're like, oh, I'm too tired. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do this. Or, oh, I signed up for this thing or the CE. I actually don't feel like going. I'm not going to go. Right. And that is how you erode trust in yourself. Right. That's how you erode your ability to trust your own voice. For me, I am very realistic about where my energy levels are. So I have certain clinical days that are just higher volume, whether I'm working with a resident or I know that the day's overbooked. So I tell myself, okay, this is going to be a tough day. So I tell myself after work, I'm allowed to do whatever I want. Now, on a lighter day, I might tell myself, okay, I've done this. This is a light day. I'm going to go to the gym or, do something for myself. and I'm going to have to do it. No matter how tired I am, I'm going to do it. And that consistent reinforcing of telling myself, I'm going to do this, I think that's also fed into my ability to trust my own clinical decisions, because that self-trust, we talk about trust with patients, but there's also trust with self. Like if you're self-confident and you trust yourself and you trust the decisions you make, and the decisions don't just apply clinically, they apply to how do you treat yourself? Do you take care of your mental health? Do you take care of your physical health? Do you do the things that you should be doing for yourself? These are all things that contribute to like being a well-rounded and balanced doctor.
That is incredible. I absolutely love how you said the promises that you make to yourself and how to keep them so that your confidence in yourself doesn't erode.
Correct.
This was very beautifully done. I do talk to my students, often our C-STEP students, when they come here to college, we talk about the fact that inside of our minds, we always have this dark horse or this voice that is telling, oh, you don't really need to go to the gym. Or you said you're going to finish your charts, but, maybe you're too tired now. And this is the ego kind of getting us an easy way out and trying to save energy and seeking immediate gratification. When you hear that voice inside of you, how do you override that voice?
It's hard. I'm just as human as any of you guys. Like it's much easier when you're tired to be like, oh, I don't want to do this. It's too much work. Or something as simple as cooking a healthy dinner. Oh, I don't want to cook today because why not? I can DoorDash something. So it's very relatable. But one of the things that I use to negotiate in my head, this is how I fight it, is, okay, I like using working out as an example. I'm not telling anyone to do crazy 2-hour, 3-hour workouts. I tell myself 20 minutes of my day. I can give 20 minutes. I spent 8 hours at work. I spend more than 20 minutes on my phone scrolling through reels or scrolling through social media, like 20 minutes. And if I'm really not feeling, like if I'm physically not feeling well, I'll stop. But 20 minutes, let me just get up and see how it goes. And what's very surprising is over time, once you start saying, oh, I'm just going to do 20 minutes, you learn that afterwards you actually feel better. Like I cannot tell you the number of times where I've been so tired and there's something that I have to do and I don't do it. And then it just makes everything worse, because then again, it goes back to that self-trust where I promised myself I was going to do this and now I haven't done this. And now I have all this doubt about, wait, why didn't I do this? And I should be doing, and there, it starts this cycle of not necessarily the most positive self-talk, but this is also where experience comes in, because the more times you say, no, I'm going to do it, the more you learn, oh, I did it. And I actually felt really good about it afterwards. And that positive reinforcement just positively reinforces additional behavior. I'm going to admit it's not easy every day. Some days are definitely harder, but I try to negotiate with myself in time increments relative to the rest of the day, right? Because 20 minutes of working out versus a 24-hour workday versus like, oh, I can watch TV for 3 hours. Why can't I just do this exercise program for half an hour, right? So it's just that rational negotiation can sometimes break up the cognitive dissonance. Same thing with charts. I'll be like end of a clinic day. There's, let's say, 8 to 10 charts left over to sign. And I could look at this at the end of the day being like, I had such a long day. I'm just going to go home. Or I could say, okay, I'm going to try to do as many charts between now and when I leave. And, maybe I don't get through all of them, but most of the time I do get through most of them. But it's just the sitting down, committing, and then like using that negotiation to kind of for me, it's the objective negotiation that forces me to action. I'm not saying this will work for everyone, but for me, if I take a step back, remove my own feelings about the situation and say, okay, if I have 8 to 10 charts to finish and I have like 15 charts to do tomorrow, where am I going to create time to do 8 to, right? So it's that objective reasoning that usually spurs me to action. But I think what's important is committing to said action first. Once you start going with anything, this is not just exercising or doing tasks. Once you start doing, the rest of the process becomes a little bit easier. But I think the hardest step is to actually do.
So I love this discussion about like not just for exercise, but just generally being kind to yourself, what you brought up about mental well-being and work-life balance as well. I did want to talk a little bit about kind of we talked about the exercise being kind to yourself for fostering emotional well-being. Is there anything you do in the office that also fosters that, or even happiness in general as well?
I think it's important to maintain friendly relationships with your staff because ultimately we are one working community. Whether that's you're in a private office or whether you're in a corporate office, there's always people you're working with. And this is something one of my older managers told me. But she's like, you're here more here than with your family. So again, you don't need to be friends and overshare at work, but having friendly interactions with the people you work with helps make the day go by easier. So on a slower day, I will have a number of staff come and talk to me, and it's usually just a small talk. We are just catching up, or they'll let me know what they did. But it breaks up the day. It's not like I'm clinic, 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 clinic. And it's nice because you feel a small sense of community amongst your coworkers, and that's a very, very pleasant thing to kind of make the day more tolerable. Another thing that I do is sometimes I play music when I'm not seeing patients. So when I'm charting and I'm in like a flow mode, I will play music that kind of gets me into this work mode. Everyone has a different genre that might stimulate that kind of flow, but that helps me focus when I'm not seeing patients.
What type of music do you listen to?
I usually listen to jazz. Like there's a
Yeah.
unlimited jazz playlist on YouTube, and it's the same one I use all the time. It just gets me through, and there's no words, there's no lyrics, so I can't really sing or get distracted. It just gets me in a very calm mood, and it gets me productive. So just find what works for you. Yeah.
Yeah, there is evidence that songs without lyrics are much more helpful in getting us in the flow state and getting us to focus.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, absolutely. In your opinion, what is happiness and how does optometry brings you happiness?
Oh, that is some profound life question, but I like it. I think happiness is not obtained. I think that is something I had to learn the hard way because I come from a culture where it's very much, oh, you get this and therefore you are happy. And it took a lot of self-reflection to get to this point because I remember graduating optometry school. I did feel very happy at my graduation, but it was after the graduation was over. It was like a chemical rush. All that joy and all that happiness. I wasn't that happy the next. Not that I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't as happy that next day. And I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. Like, it's not that if I get something, I'll be happy. I think a lot of people fall into this trap, not just with success, but with obtaining material goods or obtaining some status, whatever it is, they're obtaining something. And once they reach that goal, they're happy. I think happy is a very transient mindset, actually. I think the better word is joy. Do you have joy in your life? Joy doesn't have to be like, oh my gosh, everything is great, because that's what I think happy is. Happy is everything's great, everything's fine, I'm good, right? But joy is more of like an appreciation of I'm in a good place, and things don't have to be perfect for it to be in a good place. And that is, I think, by practicing gratitude for the things that you do have, because unfortunately, a lot of people like to harbor or focus on what is wrong with their lives. Oh, the weather's wrong. This is wrong. The traffic's wrong. Oh, my commute is terrible. Oh, there's construction. Oh, like there's so many things to be unhappy about in the world. And I could sit here and tell you about all the things that are wrong with my job or wrong with this, but that's just not the right attitude to approach life, because you will never, ever feel a sense of this is enough for me if you're always nitpicking the negative. I think it's really important to know what opportunities you have, be grateful for the opportunities you're given, and also not compare yourself to other people, right? Because my journey when I first started was not a particularly glamorous journey. I'm very lucky to be in a position where I have the respect that I would like from my colleagues and in the greater hospital setting. But it took time to get here. And if I were to be like, oh, well, at this other institution, that's not how they treat the optometrist, like I could potentially be creating my own lack of happiness, right? But my continuous dedication and showing up and again, making the connections, being true to yourself and true to your word, that reputation is something nobody can take away from you. Nobody can say, oh, well, I did that. No, no, no. I was the one who created this and I'm the one who brought these things. Like no one can take that away from you. So I think it's important to very much be grateful with what you have, but also not compare. Not compare is really, really important because there's always going to be someone who's more successful or further along in their career or is doing more than you are. But like it's just understanding where you are and what you are is enough for this particular moment. And that took a lot of time. That was not something I graduated optometry school with that attitude, but I think over time it's gotten much easier to settle into that.
Yeah. And when you talk about gratitude, what is it that you're grateful for that optometry has given you?
I think optometry has given me just a window into a system that would otherwise not be possible, right? If you think about trying to change people's lives, we are in a very fortunate profession where I think almost every day optometrists are changing lives in some way or form. And that itself is something that's amazing. That is amazing. Not every vocation will give you the opportunity to touch people in that sort of way. And most of the time, it's pretty immediate, right? A lot of times when optometrists get to intervene, it's an in-chair reaction. It's not like, oh, they're coming back to see you or we're waiting for an outcome. Usually it's we have a very instantaneous gratification profession, in my opinion. So I think every day is an opportunity to be thankful that you can serve somebody. But in a bigger context, it's how can we serve the general good of people? And again, we are such fundamental healthcare providers. Anyone who says otherwise, they're probably working for ophthalmology, but I'm just kidding. But really, at the end of the day, I think there's so much that can be done through optometry. And again, not to sound like a disease lecture, but so many systemic things can be found through an eye exam. And that could very easily change the trajectory of somebody's life, right? So it's knowing that you have this privilege, you have this ability. It's a very humbling and great position to be in.
Thank you. Dr. Wang, any final questions?
Nope. I think that was a great note to end on, just about the importance of not just trying to obtain happiness, but finding those joy moments in what you're doing as well throughout your day-to-day life. I guess
I have a quick one, and it can be
okay.
like a rapid
No,
fire.
you have time. You have
A rapid
time.
fire. What's the best career advice you have received and the worst career
Oh,
advice you have
I actually thought about this morning as I was driving to work because I'm like, this is going to come. This is definitely going to come.
So you anticipate.
I think the best career advice I got was actually when I was a first year at SUNY. It was I don't remember who it was, but it was one of the guest lecturers who came in and they were just like, your first job is not your last job. And you don't have to let that first job define you. As someone who went through a bit of a non-traditional path to end up where I am, I think that piece of advice has really carried me over the years because as I said, I didn't have the transition into a institutional role, and I haven't been here for the entirety of my career. And it's very easy to be discouraged as a young optometrist, maybe matching in a position that doesn't really fit with you and then feeling like you have to stay or prove that you are not jumping job. There's a lot to go behind that, but I think the first job won't define you and it won't be a projection onto future success. So I think that was the best piece of advice, is just your first job will not define you forever. So I think that's really important. The worst piece of career advice I received is actually from one of my preceptors in fourth year, where I got called in and I got told that I have terrible communication skills and no empathy. And they said that this is something that you're born with, and that, if you don't have it, you can't be successful. And that was very empowering, or not empowering, that was very impactful to hear that as a fourth year, as a younger person, to hear that coming from a mentor that was supposed to teach me how to be a better doctor. That was very damaging to me. And I went through a period of time thinking that there was something wrong with the way I spoke. And that is absolutely not true. I think that sometimes the words that our preceptors say, especially negative ones, can last with us for a very long time. But I've been fortunate to grow out of that. I think a lot of times there's a lack of cultural awareness, a lack of understanding how different cultures and different people may communicate, and that can be perceived as being lack of empathy or lack of compassion. And I think in working in an environment that culturally is very different from mine, I had to do a lot of self-learning, and also learning about the people I serve, how their communication style is different, how their approach to different things is different. And just because it's different, that doesn't mean it's inferior or wrong. So I think especially comments about your personality, everyone is going to have a different personality as a doctor. And sorry, I'm going to actually go back to a good piece of advice I received. I remember when I was doing my residency, one of the doctors told me, they're like, everybody is going to educate a patient differently. You have to find the education style that fits your personality, right? So like if I try to emulate a style that is not mine, first of all, that's exhausting. Second of all, I mean, some patients may perceive that as being fake or being overly, whatever the adjective is. And your voice, again, it comes over time. It comes through iterations and iterations of development, being open to receiving feedback and actual like constructive feedback, not just you lack empathy, because that is very, very hard to digest as someone who went into this field wanting to help people, wanting to make a difference. So that I think that's a good answer.
Thank you. Definitely is. And I would just summarize the things I have learned, Dr. Wang. First, successful people wear many hats. Channel your passions. We probably have multiple passions, so find ways to channel our passions. Have non-negotiables. Show up. Develop your communication skills. And what I've realized, Dr. Lam, is that you're a master negotiator. Every job interview went to every job, you negotiated your
Yes.
wants, your desires, your whys into the job. So we talk about job crafting, and you have done that masterfully. So thank you. This was great, great, great talk. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for this opportunity. I hope that this advice will help students going forward who are finding their way.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, and we will hopefully see everyone on our next interview. Have a good
Thank
day.
you so much,
Bye.
Dr. Lam.
Thank you so much. Have a good day,
Have a good
guys.
one. Take care.